In 2008, during the demolition of a building in Chicago's South Side, workers discovered something strange. In the building's basement, there was a metal door, rusted and locked. When they forced it open, they found themselves facing a tunnel 5 meters wide and 3 meters high. The tunnel stretched into darkness, and no one knew where it led. The workers called the police, and when officers entered the tunnel and walked 100 meters, they reached another door. This door opened to the basement of another building 6 blocks away. And in that basement, they found something else. Wooden crates stacked against the walls, all empty, but with markings on them. Property of AC, 1929. AC, Alphonse Capone. The police had just discovered part of Al Capone's underground empire, a network that had been hidden for 80 years. But the real question was this: if this tunnel still existed, how many more were out there? And what else was hidden in them? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because in upcoming episodes, we'll be telling the real story of the Valentine's Day Massacre and the secret of Jimmy's betrayal. The beginning. Why tunnels were necessary. To understand why Al Capone built an underground city beneath Chicago, you need to understand what the city was like in the 1920s. When Prohibition began in 1920, alcohol trade became illegal overnight. Suddenly, bars, distilleries, breweries all had to close. But demand didn't disappear. Americans still wanted to drink, and when legal supply vanished, illegal supply emerged. And that's where organized crime found its golden opportunity. Chicago became the bootlegging capital of America. The city was perfectly positioned, close to Canada, where alcohol was still legal, connected to major railways, had a massive population that wanted to drink. By 1925, it was estimated that Chicago had over 5,000 speakeasies, hidden bars where people drank illegally, and someone had to supply all that alcohol. That someone was Al Capone. But there was a problem. The police were raiding these speakeasies constantly. Not all cops were corrupt. Some actually tried to enforce prohibition. And even the corrupt ones had to make occasional busts to keep up appearances. So Capone needed a way to move alcohol around the city without being seen. Trucks were too obvious. They could be stopped and searched. Ships on the Chicago River were monitored. So Capone looked down, underground. If he couldn't move alcohol on the streets, he would move it beneath the streets. The idea wasn't entirely new. Chicago had been building tunnels since the 1800s. The city had an extensive freight tunnel system, built in the late 19th century to move coal and goods between buildings without clogging the streets. By the 1920s, many of these tunnels were abandoned or forgotten. Capone saw opportunity. He acquired maps of the old tunnel system, identified which tunnels could be accessed, and began connecting them to his operations. But he didn't stop there. Where old tunnels didn't reach, he built new ones. Building a tunnel in secret sounds impossible, but in 1920s Chicago, it wasn't that hard. Capone controlled entire neighborhoods. He owned buildings, paid off cops, employed construction crews. When his men started digging in a basement, neighbors either didn't notice or didn't dare to ask questions. And the excavated dirt? It was mixed with construction debris and hauled away as regular trash. Over 5 years, from 1925 to 1930, Capone's organization built or renovated an estimated 15 miles of tunnels under Chicago. 15 miles. That's not just a tunnel. That's an underground highway system connecting speakeasies, warehouses, breweries, and safe houses across the entire city. The architecture of crime, engineering the underground. The engineering behind Capone's tunnels was surprisingly sophisticated. These weren't crude holes in the ground. They were properly constructed passageways designed to last and remain hidden. FBI reports from the 1930s, recently declassified, contain descriptions of tunnel construction based on informant testimony. According to these reports, Capone employed experienced miners and construction workers, many of them immigrants who had worked on railway tunnels in Europe. The typical Capone tunnel was 8 to 10 feet wide and 7 feet high, tall enough for a man to walk comfortably, wide enough for 2 men to pass each other or to roll barrels through. The walls were reinforced with timber beams and in some sections with brick. The floors were either packed dirt or, in heavily used sections, laid with wooden planks. Lighting was minimal. Electric bulbs strung along the ceiling at intervals, powered by generators or tapped illegally into the city's power grid. Ventilation was crucial. A sealed underground space quickly becomes unbreathable. Capone's engineers solved this by connecting tunnels to building basements at regular intervals, allowing air circulation. In some cases, they installed ventilation shafts that rose to street level, disguised as utility access points. One FBI agent noted in his report, "The ventilation system was so well designed that a man could spend hours in the tunnels without experiencing breathing difficulties." This suggests professional engineering, not amateur construction. Access points were cleverly concealed. The most common entrance was through a basement, hidden behind a false wall or inside what appeared to be a coal chute or storage room. Some entrances had multiple security layers, a locked door, then a narrow passage that turned sharply, then another door. This design prevented anyone from seeing far into the tunnel system even if they breached the first door. And it gave defenders time to respond if police raided an entrance. The tunnels served multiple purposes. The primary use was moving bootleg alcohol. Trucks would deliver to a building above the tunnel. Barrels would be lowered into the tunnel through a freight elevator or pulley system, then rolled or carted through the tunnel to another building, sometimes miles away, where they'd be raised up and distributed. This system meant alcohol could move across Chicago without ever appearing on the street where police could intercept it. But the tunnels had other uses too. They were escape routes. When police raided a speakeasy, Capone's men could vanish into the basement and emerge blocks away beyond the police cordon. They were storage facilities. In some wider sections of tunnel, rooms were carved out where alcohol, money, and weapons could be stored in climate-controlled safety. And they were, according to some accounts, execution chambers, isolated places where informants and enemies could be dealt with and their bodies disposed of without witnesses. The Green Mill Connection, a living example to understand how these tunnels functioned in practice. Let's look at one specific location, the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge. The Green Mill, which still operates today on North Broadway, was one of Capone's favorite establishments in the 1920s. He had a special booth there, positioned so he could see both the entrance and the stage. The booth's back wall had a hidden door that led to a passage, which connected to the tunnel system. The Green Mill's tunnel connection served multiple purposes. When federal agents raided the club in 1928, Capone wasn't caught because he vanished through his booth into the tunnel. Witnesses reported seeing him sitting at his table, then minutes later he was gone, and police searching the building couldn't find him. He had walked through the tunnel to a building 3 blocks away and was sipping coffee in a legitimate restaurant by the time agents realized he'd escaped. But the tunnel also moved product. The Green Mill went through massive quantities of alcohol. Jazz musicians played all night. Crowds drank until dawn. Delivering that much alcohol by truck would have been obvious. Instead, barrels came through the tunnel from a brewery Capone controlled in a warehouse half a mile away. The barrels would be rolled through the tunnel at night, brought up into the Green Mill's basement, and stored there. No trucks, no street deliveries, no obvious supply chain for police to follow. There's also a darker story connected to the Green Mill Tunnel. In 1927, a singer named Joe E. Lewis was performing at the Green Mill when he decided to leave and perform at a rival club for better pay. Capone took this as disrespect. On November 10, 1927, 3 of Capone's men broke into Lewis's hotel room and attacked him. They slashed his throat and tongue, beat him severely, and left him for dead. Lewis survived, but his singing voice was destroyed. According to some accounts, never confirmed, the attackers reached Lewis's hotel through the tunnel system, entering the hotel's basement and taking a service elevator up. This allowed them to avoid being seen entering the building's front entrance. The Federal Hunt. Trying to map the invisible by 1930, federal agents knew Capone had tunnel systems, but they didn't know the extent. Elliot Ness and his team made mapping Capone's underground network a priority. It wasn't easy. Unlike modern cities with complete underground utility maps, 1920s Chicago's subsurface was poorly documented. Old freight tunnels appeared on some maps, but not others. Private construction wasn't always permitted properly. And Capone's additions were, of course, entirely secret. Ness tried multiple approaches. First, his agents interviewed city engineers and construction workers, trying to find anyone who had worked on Capone's tunnel projects. They found a few workers willing to talk, but most had been paid well to keep quiet and feared Capone's retribution. One worker who did cooperate told agents, We dug for 3 months on a tunnel from a warehouse to a speakeasy. We worked at night, took dirt out in barrels, told neighbors we were fixing the foundation. When it was done, Capone paid each of us $500 and told us to forget we ever did it. $500 was a year's wages. We forgot. Second, Ness's team tried to track Capone's alcohol distribution. They watched known speakeasies to see how they received deliveries. What they found was puzzling. Some clubs seemed to operate without any deliveries at all. No trucks, no barrels being carried in, yet these places served hundreds of drinks a night. The only explanation was underground delivery through tunnels. Third, and most dramatically, FBI agents began exploring the old freight tunnel system. In 1931, after Capone was convicted and imprisoned, agents entered Chicago's abandoned freight tunnels with maps, flashlights, and marking chalk. What they found was stunning. The old freight tunnel system covered 42 miles under Chicago's downtown. And within that system, agents found evidence of recent use in multiple locations: fresh boards, electric wiring, empty barrel storage, even sleeping areas with cots and blankets. One FBI report describes finding a command center in the tunnel system beneath the old Lexington Hotel, where Capone kept his headquarters. The report states, "In a widened section of tunnel approximately 40 feet below street level, we discovered a room furnished with a desk, chairs, filing cabinets, and a safe. The safe was empty, but bore marks of being recently opened." Modern discoveries. What we're still finding fast forward to the 21st century. Chicago has changed dramatically. Old buildings demolished, new ones built, entire neighborhoods transformed. But beneath the city, remnants of Capone's tunnel system still exist, and we keep finding them. The 2008 discovery wasn't unique. In 2003, during construction of a new subway line, workers broke through into a large tunnel that wasn't on any city map. The tunnel was brick-lined, well-constructed, and led toward what was once a warehouse district in the 1920s. City historians examined the tunnel and concluded it was likely built during Prohibition, possibly by Capone's organization. In 2012, a Chicago homeowner renovating his basement found a metal door behind a wall he was demolishing. Behind the door was a narrow tunnel, shored up with old timber, leading into darkness. The homeowner called police, who explored the tunnel and found it went 3 houses down the block before it collapsed. In 2016, during the renovation of a former speakeasy in the South Loop, construction workers found not just a tunnel but an entire underground room beneath the basement. The room was approximately 20 by 30 feet with shelving along the walls and hooks in the ceiling. But the room's entrance was through a concealed door in the floor, and the room itself was completely absent from the building's original blueprints. Most dramatically, in 2019, a Chicago historian organized an expedition into Chicago's freight tunnel system, much of which is abandoned but still accessible. Using modern LED lighting and safety equipment, the team spent 6 hours underground, exploring tunnels that hadn't been entered in decades. They found sections where the old freight tunnels had been modified, walls knocked through to create new passages, side rooms carved out, reinforced doorways installed. They found remains of electrical wiring, old light fixtures and markings on the walls, painted symbols and numbers that appeared to be some kind of navigation system for people moving through the tunnels. The treasure question: what's still down there? Now, we come to the question everyone asks. If Capone had all these tunnels, did he hide money in them? The short answer is probably yes. We know from FBI records that Capone stored various things in the tunnels, alcohol obviously, but also weapons, documents, and cash for immediate operational use. When police found the command center tunnel room under the Lexington Hotel in 1931, they found an empty safe. The safe had been recently opened. There were fresh scratches around the lock, suggesting someone had been in that room after Capone's conviction, but before FBI arrived. Who opened the safe? What was in it? No one knows. Over the years, several tunnel discoveries have included finding objects of value. In 1998, during renovation of an old building in Cicero, workers found a tunnel entrance and, inside the tunnel, 5 metal strongboxes. When police opened them, they found approximately $45,000 in old currency. Bills from the 1920s. In 2011, a tunnel discovered during subway construction contained a leather satchel with $82,000 in it. The money was in remarkably good condition, sealed in wax paper inside the satchel.
These discoveries raise an intriguing possibility. What if Capone distributed his wealth throughout the tunnel system in small caches?
Rather than one giant treasure in one location, he might have hidden money in dozens of small stashes throughout the tunnels. If this theory is correct, then every time we find a Capone tunnel, there's a chance there's money hidden in it. And if experts estimate that 8 to 10 miles of tunnel remain undiscovered, sealed behind walls or collapsed sections, how much money might still be down there, in metal boxes and sealed chambers waiting in the dark? The legend persists because the tunnels are real, the money was real, and the combination of those two facts creates an irresistible mystery that Chicago has been chasing for nearly a century.